Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas. I'm going to be your host today, and this is episode 293, where we're going to be talking about myths about joining the game industry and how to improve it. So, working in the games industry has become more and more coveted as the medium has evolved over recent decades. With this boom of up-and-coming devs, more and more misinformation pervades the conversation. So today, we'll be debunking some myths about what it means to join the game industry while sharing some ideas on how we can improve it, and even yourself. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey, everybody, and we're back. And today with me, I have Cassie Hoglund. Did I butcher that? We even just talked about this, didn't we?
No, you got it right.
Okay. I didn't butcher it, folks. But anyways, we have Cassie Hoglund. She is the Warcraft Mobile social media manager. That's, part of the Blizzard team. And man, you have done so much in your past and everything else. Like, for example, I don't know. There's a lot I want to expound upon here real quick. So, past projects, just some that people may recognize as you were you worked on Spellbreak for a little bit, but right now you're working on part of the team. As that role of mobile social media manager of Warcraft Arclight Rumble. You also have, you're the owner of the Indie Horde, and I'm just going to stop for a minute because there's a lot of things I want to find out here. First of all, what is Indie Horde? Let's hear about that first.
So, Indie Horde is a personal project of mine that is kind of an off and on review site that I
Cool.
own, and the whole idea is like eventually you'd have just a pile of indie games in your life because so many of them are short form that it would be like a dragon's hoard of games. And so that is the site that I put up reviews and sometimes even walkthroughs and news of indie games that I am very excited about. Again, it's very off and on. I am going back to school right now, so
Nice.
time is limited even to play games, let alone review games. But that is where the thoughts go.
Nice. So it's really cool to have that in reviews, and I'm guessing too that some of that has kind of stemmed, like, just it's like an extension in a way from this passion you have, because you have quite a bit of experience in the industry that obviously led you to the point where you're at now with working at Blizzard. But I mean, you have 6 years of game industry experience working on indies and other projects, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about what those projects entailed and other things, because I'm sure there's, or at least a snapshot, if you will, because I'm sure there's a lot of exciting things that happened in that time frame.
Yeah, of course. The funny thing is, in terms of working with games, I actually started as a streamer on Twitch. That's really where I found my love of discussing games, helping people find games, and really finding community around them after being a solo player for my entire life. And after doing some spotlights, reviews, being a beta player, etc., I really tried to move into the professional space. So I have worked as an individual contributor for a few different companies, and I've also done a lot of agency side work. So I've really been able to have my hand on a lot of projects, including some of the listeners might recognize the Headliner series from Unbound Creations. Those were super fun to work on. And I was also the social media manager for the publisher of Round Guard when it was launched. Also a great, quick form game to play. So there's a variety there. I've also worked on a lot of unlaunched projects as well. But in general, it's been cross-platform, mobile, social media games, multi-platform games, and now moving into the Blizzard space, trying to help take a brand that's basically as old as I am and
Yeah,
bringing it enthusiastically into mobile.
that's awesome to hear. And you know what? I really love that you shared that snapshot, that brief history of yours, because it couldn't really summarize any better than why we're here, why we're having this discussion today. So, but before we get into that, I'm gonna have to have you go into the Q box round. So, for people who aren't familiar with the Q box round, it's just simply a series of random questions I've prepared here for Cassie. And Cassie, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, good. So, first is smoothie or milkshake?
Smoothie all day. I'm lactose intolerant and I want to be able to enjoy my treats.
I don't blame you. And for Cassie and those who are lactose intolerant, have you ever tried lactate vanilla bean ice cream or vanilla ice cream?
I have tried lactate ice cream, yes.
Okay. I think
I
it's
did enjoy
phenomenal.
it.
You did?
I, yes, it's
Okay,
a
good.
solid choice.
I think by far it's the best vanilla out there. So anybody who cares, even if you're not lactose intolerant, you should have that ice cream. Anyways, I digress. Next question. What was your least favorite food as a child?
That would have to be mayonnaise.
No. It's
I
okay.
know it feels like it's taboo to say so, but I would refuse to eat anything with mayonnaise in it. And coming from a family that like originates domestically anyway in the Midwest, that's tough
Yeah.
for
Yep.
a young person.
Very true. All right. What's your favorite video game character of all time?
Okay, see, this question is really unfair after years and years of amazing characters. And I think we all develop feelings for our player characters in these games as well. But I feel like if you really pressured me on this one, I do have a tattoo of Tattle from Majora's Mask. She is your companion fairy in
Mm.
Majora's Mask, and she has a twin named Tail. So together they are Tattletale, which is so cute. So I love Tattle, but it is a bit dated to say Tattle. So maybe I'm aging myself a little bit,
It's
and I
okay.
should go more with Bretta from Hollow Knight, who is a very spicy ladybug who has strong daydreams that can cause some romantic problems for our knight character.
Oh, such great choices. All right. And last but not least, the staple here on the show is what game are you playing now?
Yeah, so like I said, I don't have a ton of time right now, so I'm really prioritizing things that are easy to hop in and out of, which is helpful because I literally just finished the remaster of Ni no Kuni: Wrath of the White Witch, which
Oh, I need to finish
if you
that.
know, it's like an 80-hour game. It's so long. But I did finish it, and now I have moved on to the much more chill game Potion Craft on
Nice.
Xbox Game Pass, which I'm having such a good time with, and it's so charming and very much a hop in, hop out
Right. Yep.
sort of title for me.
Oh, such good choices. And oh man, I'm right at the point in Nino Kuni, and it's been now months, but where you have three different objectives, so like 3 stars on the map. But I
So
don't know where I am in the game, like how many hours I put in and where. But I feel like I'm a quarter of the way through, if that. But at any
it
rate,
takes a while.
it does. But it's so good. You're right. Oh man. Okay, I got to get back into it. Anyways, thank you so much for diving in and sharing those things about you. Really interesting stuff. But now here we are ready to get right into this discussion. And as I shared with everyone already in the intro, we're here to talk about myths about joining the game industry. And I think this is a really interesting topic, and one clearly that you have a lot of experience with based off of what you shared already. So To kick things off, I'm curious. Why do you think it's important to dispel misinformation about the games industry? Like, where do you think this issue and many other kind of stem from?
I think this is a great question, Andrew. And really, I think that the root of misconceptions within groups of folks who are trying to get into the gaming industry, it comes from their passion. And of course, in creative industries, we love passion. We almost demand passion at every stage. Once you're in the gaming industry, if you're trying to get in, it doesn't really matter. We want that enthusiasm, and as creative people who are invested in our products, we want to have that, and we want to be enthusiastic and be team players for the people that we work for. It's easy to forget that a game studio is a company. And I mean that in a very traditional sense,
Mm,
where they have a bottom line, they have employees, and decisions are made in the best interest of the company, not necessarily the employees working there. So I think that there is a sort of starry-eyed aspect that I certainly struggled with as well when I was looking to get into the gaming industry on what it really means, because it is a job, and it doesn't matter what you do in gaming, it's still a job. You
mm.
will have reporting, you will have a boss that you may or may not like. You may be passed over for promotions. You may not get raises that you think that you should have. I mean, all of the same pitfalls of non-endemic jobs apply to games. You just might be able to take advantage of a community that is also into games, and I think it's really important for, in particular, people who are trying to transition into games to separate their enthusiasm as a gamer from their interest in a particular company. And for myself, I have kind of a rule that I will not work at a studio whose products I have a particular affection for,
Mm.
because I don't want to be disappointed. And there is such a thing as being too close to something um, in that regard. So it's great to be enthusiastic. It's great to want it and to want it badly. But at the end of the day, it is a job. It is a company that you're working for, and all of the same rules apply.
I really like that approach that you take with this, honestly, that like, hey, look, this is something you could be passionate about and excited and everything, and that's all great, but it's still a job. And it's funny because I would think that what you just shared about with like kind of setting your expectations, a lot of people at face value might think like, well, why would you think that? But if we like just think through it for a moment, it's something really good because it's like again when you have that mindset about saying, hey, this is a job, and if you do get to attach something, there could be a lot of things that I mean, well, I'm sure there's positive sides of things, but there could be negative things that affect that job too. And then also it could lead you down this path that you ultimately never saw happening as you're pursuing like your passion and a career in the games industry. So it's really good to hear that because it does paint a different picture than I think a lot of people even spend time to consider or even have thought of.
Yes, I agree.
So with that said, I want to kind of go into some other areas like let's say with like misconceptions and even opinions people might have. So I'm curious, what would you say are some of the common misconceptions you found about both indie and AAA game development, for example?
Yeah. So at this point, I have worked a lot in indies, but I've also been exposed to AAA. Obviously, I work at Blizzard, and I've also had my fair share in sort of that gray area of AA, like we're well funded, but it's still technically a smaller team, or still technically not self-funding, so still falls into the non-AAA category. And I will say, in my experience, the same issues plague every studio and take active attention in order to address them. So things like, hey, you're really great at doing XYZ. Like maybe I'm really good at doing social media, but does that make me a good people manager?
Mm.
Not necessarily. If you're a really good programmer, does that make you a good boss? I would say no, you can be both, but one does not necessitate the other. And I do think that there's an idea that people management just sort of happens, and it happens well without much much attention. And that is absolutely not the case, especially when you consider that the Venn diagram for um, social anxieties at all for gamers, it's a pretty big overlap, and so there's a lot of room for miscommunication, for misunderstanding, and then you throw in issues of organization, both on an individual level and on an like a whole organization level. It's a constant battle to have proper communication between people, between teams, and to make sure that things are going smoothly, that folks are happy where they are. And this is just across any level of gaming studio that I've been in. And I certainly get that impression when I look at the shared experiences of my peers and the folks within my network who have had their own fair share of experiences at multiple studios as well. So I would say organization and communication are probably the big ones that we just assume bigger studios will have more together, and that's just not the case.
Yeah, and you even said yourself from your experience that's also like basically across the board. Where I mean, it's not specific to any particular area of the industry.
Right.
And then,
Right. And I do think it is something that's almost particular to creative industries because
mm,
there's almost this idea of, hey, everyone's equal here, we all get an equal say, even though, when it comes down to it, that's not the case. And in non-endemic industries, I do feel like you're more likely to have a very clear cut um, like ladder of command, chain of command. Why did I say ladder?
yeah, no, it works. I know what you meant. No, no, that's really interesting. And I'm going to digress for a quick moment and then get right back here. But what I'm curious about is I think you're calling out to some really important things. And one of the key ones was communication. So of those things, and again, this is just simply your opinion here. What would you say? Because it sounds like you said people can get into these roles, but not necessarily be good or like great or even good at these roles. So from communication standpoint and the other things you mentioned, what are some like ideas that you have that could improve people to be better? Because sometimes they don't have a choice about these roles that they're fulfilling.
Yes, there definitely is that aspect, in particular with the acquisition of proletariat of it's not the same freedom of choice of where you're going to end up necessarily, what
Hmm.
team you're going to end up on when you have a company saying, okay, we want to transfer all of your talent. These are the openings we have, pick from what we have, or this is a particular project that we want you to work on. And you will only work on this project. That is our preference. Is definitely something that has come up with the acquisition of proletariat. And for me personally, I am the only one from proletariat who's working on ArcLight Rumble, just as you know a matter of open positions.
Hmm.
And it has been really interesting to see kind of how that separation has affected like my ability to integrate into the team of proletariat and feel like I'm still part of that team. This is the first time that I've been part of an acquisition like this, and it's definitely not at all what I was expecting, though not necessarily in a bad way. I do really enjoy my new team. I enjoy the game that I'm working on, but I will say that it's difficult to maintain kind of the thought processes that I used to have
Mm.
on, what it means to be in AAA and what it means to be part of a trusted team. And this is a very unfortunate situation, I think, for my team because all of the marketing folks from Proletariat, except for myself, have left. Either they were unable to be integrated into the Blizzard team, or since the acquisition, they have voluntarily left.
Mm.
And it is, I think, a really disillusioning experience, especially when you're working on the publishing side of things, to feel like an entire area is disposable is maybe a harsh word, but it's not something that is isolated to this. I've seen it in just about every studio that I've worked in that wasn't an agency. Um, and you can kind of see how decisions are very bureaucratical and not necessarily considering individual folks. And, this harkens back to the idea that we discussed earlier on it's a company, they make decisions for the company.
Right.
And without the company, you don't have a job. So, like, where's the argument, right? So it's just interesting to see how, bureaucracy plays out in a larger environment, how communication issues can become exacerbated when there's more distance between you and the person that you're trying to communicate with. And this relationship that the dev side, as we kind of call it colloquially, and publishing side have a long-standing disagreement, I think, throughout the entire industry that is played out no matter what. And it doesn't matter how close you are in terms of executive to individual contributor or how far away. I went from having, 2, maybe 3 levels of management between me and the C-suite guys at Proletariat to now there are more like 7, 8, 9 between me and the folks in those roles at Blizzard. But I have felt the disconnect on, the dev side versus publishing side and scheduling updates versus time for marketing for updates or things that are community driven and not analytics, like product analytics driven, etc. Those disagreements are still very much there. And it's not something that anybody has the magic solution for. I'm going to be honest with you, Andrew. I really hoped that AAA was going to be the place where that was figured out. And unfortunately, no. But we're all working towards it, right? It is a team effort to get there.
Yeah, I mean, and it kind of makes sense to a degree, right? I mean, to like you said, it was some areas that you were hoping for. There might be a little bit more clarity or certain levels of structure you would anticipate. Not to say that there isn't structure, obviously, but to get to that degree. But the other side of it, and like I think you mentioned or alluded to, is just like, when these things change into much larger entities, the dynamics can change significantly. I mean, just at a simple take, you said now you're approximately like 7, 8, people away from like sea level compared to where it was before, where it was like 2 or 3, and that is a dramatic change. And then from a system to even function. What we would like to anticipate as being ideal is still a lot because there's so many moving parts. So, but I think it's good that you outlined that and kind of just from your own personal experience, because again, it goes back to what you were saying before about like setting those expectations. This is a company. Things are going to be said or changes are going to be made based off of something you may either are privy to that information or have no clue about or have really no say in anything, but it's almost that idea and concept of just kind of going with the flow, and it is what it is. But um, we can all still work together and strive to have a place where that form of communication is a lot more forthcoming than not in some cases. And it is always a tricky situation. And I've dealt with this with people and clients before too, where it's like communication is key, but there's always going to be that dynamic of that culture or whatever until it really like aligns with everything. It's just but again, we all strive for it, right?
Yes, we all strive for it. I mean, I hope that we all strive for it. And it is important, I think, to make space for yourself to not take those disagreements personally.
Right.
And a way that I do that is I imagine, and I know this is totally debunked science, but it helps in the mental analogy, is to imagine dev side folks. So we're talking like the analytics folks, the programmers, the product managers, the producers, as left brain mathematicians who want to see the data and they want to see the equations and they want to know what the result is supposed to be, what's the expected result, and how can we, fine tune our process to get to that specific goal. And folks on the publishing side, the social, the community, the marketing side are like, yeah, math is important, but also look at this really cool thing that we could do, just because we can do it. And like
Mm.
it'll get us numbers, but maybe not these like um, super specific numbers that you're looking for, but it'll get us something. And there's definitely this kind of grounding force that happens on the dev side of like, hey, we can't spend all of our money on how far into the sky can we put our kite. And the publishing side is like, okay, sure, but we got to do some cool stuff here, some unique stuff. And there's a balance. There's always a balance. And maybe that's just what the disagreement is. It's a weird battle of finding the middle ground between, the balloon that wants to fly away and the person who wants to keep the balloon right where it is.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and the other funny, like again, it comes down to like you're right. There's moving parts, there's objectives. I mean, like the bigger you get, I think the more people you have to report to. I mean, there could be shareholders, there could be investors, there could be so many other things to this, and which like maybe as a an engineer or developer that if you're part of a big small cog in a big wheel, that those are things that don't matter to you, right? So it's just really interesting stuff on all these things, again, how they can be so dynamic. um, you said some interesting things too, though, that I thought was pretty interesting. That kind of leads me into another area I want to focus on about, especially with your past, but like talking about like key distinctions kind of between games and other industries, because you were just mentioning about like kind of finding that common ground and stuff and like trying new things, for example. And I could imagine that from your past, there especially let's say working in non-game industries, there's probably a lot of things coming from there that you could try out that don't relate to games and things like that. But specifically, I'm just kind of curious, what would you say are some key distinctions that you found between working in games and then non-game industry endeavors?
Yeah, this is a great topic because I spent about 5 years of my career in non-gaming positions before I took that leap and went into gaming. And I have to say, this is gonna sound super weird, but I consider my pre-gaming jobs to be like capital D desk jobs. And for some reason, I don't feel that way about my gaming jobs, despite the
Mm.
fact that I am probably at a desk more than I ever was. Uh, for those other jobs. And I feel like um, a big difference is that there's this feeling of potential and
Mm,
possibility, at least in my field, when it comes to gaming, because like you just don't know
right.
what the next trend is, what could be viable for making a splash or putting some money into for getting eyes on, whatever game you're working on. Whereas outside of this, um, it feels much more strict, even when we're just talking about social media and the voice of what you're doing and what you're allowed to do. It's very different. Some folks listening might have seen by now the TikTok trend around an automotive shop in Florida, where their social media manager just added a dancing cat to their very first video, and they were like, guys, I lied on my resume. Help me get all of these views so that I'm not fired. And now they've got, a suite of videos out, super viral, to the point where like now the manager has to talk with Google because they're getting review bombed with positive reviews instead of negative reviews from people who've never been there. And that's so foreign to the non-gaming aspect of like what are you doing, what is memeing, I don't understand. um it's very dry and very formal in how things happen, whether it's communications for what I'm doing, where you're talking about external communications, or if you're talking about internal communications, what's your relationship with your boss.
Mm,
And for myself, I can say that my non-gaming bosses were always very distant. There was a level of like, we work in the same building, but we would never hang.
yeah.
Um, Whereas every boss in gaming that I've had that I did enjoy, that I thought, we had a good rapport together, I'm still in contact with them, years later. And we have hung out, and, despite dynamics changing because they're no longer my boss, we are friends, and we did establish that relationship, and you can establish that relationship. Um, so I would say there's just a lot more potential for many things in gaming than outside of gaming because of the culture. It's very people oriented as much as you can outside of the corporate conglomerate. But the individuals are very much about people, and I think that by itself is so different and makes me in particular want to stay in gaming. Like I could take my skills and go, do social for a grass seed company if I wanted to. But that sounds way less fun than being with otherwise enthusiastic people who want to have lasting relationships with their colleagues.
Yeah, that is really an interesting distinction, and it makes sense, right? You have people there that within the games that are very focused, and I would say still to one degree or another passionate about that space, right? But then in non-game stuff, that's not necessarily the case, and I can relate too. I'm sure all of us listening can relate to a point where you were there and you try to talk to and open up to some of your coworkers and colleagues about like games or going to a gaming event, and they might look at you a little funny some days, like, wait, you go to PAX East? What's that? It's like, oh, it's a video game convention. And then, in local mass news, they say, oh, the game nerd convention. like they
Yeah.
talk about how Boston's going to be bombarded with all these nerds on the
Yeah,
radio.
all the kids, and I'm like, I'm 31. Like,
Yeah, and
uh,
it's
yeah.
just too funny. And real quick, I am just curious. I don't want to dive into it or anything. From your non-game experience, and I think this kind of paints a little bit more of a clearer picture. Was what you were working? Was it like B2B, like business to business or business consumer type companies, or where they're like service oriented? Or I'm just kind of getting a rough idea. I mean, it sounds like it really is applicable to anything non-game industry with maybe some slight variations that are outliers. But I was just curious from your own experience, was it like, what kind of businesses did you work for at a high
Yeah.
level?
So this is gonna seem like a pretty crazy trajectory here, but I initially I worked in a library, and then I transitioned into the logging via aviation industry. So it was
Whoa.
a helicopter operations outfit that did like firefighting and logging with helicopters, and I did like their customs paperwork and inventory and stuff like that um, for a few years, and then moved into retirement benefits in the public sector. Always good to establish financial dread in yourself as early as possible. um, and actually, when I was really trying to get into gaming and I could only really do part time, I worked in food service, also part time, and that was I I think my very first time really doing um, customer service that
Mm.
was that type. And I will say that what I mentioned with your last question, it applies to all of it.
Yeah.
I don't talk to any of those bosses anymore, regardless of if we had a good relationship or not.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny as you're saying that. I'm sure we're all kind of playing through this in our own heads. That for you listening, is yeah, there might be a select few, but otherwise, yeah, there really isn't. And I think we've all had similar experiences. Maybe not like helicopter logging and firefighting, but that sounds awesome, by the way. But still, yeah, no, it's really an interesting. That I would feel that it would be fairly consistent if we were to ask a lot of people in the industry. But at any rate, really interesting stuff. And thanks for sharing that too, because I think that extra level of clarity gives just a little snippet of what we're really seeing with this, and how distinct the game industry really is, and especially from a culture perspective, right? So, with that said, and providing us that extra insight from your own experience, for anyone out there who is aspiring to work in the games industry, how would you recommend kind of like separating the truth from myths in researching this field? Because let's face it, we all know Reddit can be a double-edged sword, especially with
Yes.
this type of endeavor.
Yes, Reddit can be at once very supporting and also completely debilitating, and it doesn't really matter what you're doing. Yeah, this is a great question, and it's something that I wish I had somebody talk to me about more when I was looking to get into gaming. And I think a big one, and it's going to be disappointing, is to curb your enthusiasm,
Mm,
because we have a lot of assumptions that we make in our excitement to maybe work in the field. And if you're just starting, you're probably looking at something that is a studio you know. It's a product that you know, maybe one that you really like. Um, and that's fine. But and I mentioned this earlier as well, that enthusiasm can really blind you to um, very common, really expected issues that you might have in those positions. And we're just sort of expecting to walk into this magical candy land of everybody is the most amazing person you ever met. Everybody is obviously going to do their job to their full capacity. There's nobody's a slacker. Nobody is going to treat you poorly. Every space is 100% safe for everyone, because you would never make things unsafe for people. You would never slack off at your job. You'd be working in games. You would do anything that you could to keep that. So I would say, make sure that you're not running away with yourself on what you imagine it to be because it is still a job. And, yeah, some studios might have candy machines or beanbag chairs or whatever in their office, and that's not something that you're going to get down at like Wells Fargo. Fine. Um, but it's still a job, and pizza parties for retention come in many forms.
Yeah.
So that would be probably my biggest recommendation. And as far as, really researching to get a good impression, if you're looking to get into games, you probably already, follow people in the industry or you're trying to. And I would say, do that. Look what folks say. You don't need to necessarily DM everybody that you follow, but people in the gaming industry are very open
Yes.
about their experiences as much as any NDA will allow them. And you're going to get an idea of, where is great to work, where is not so great to work. Gaming news is always happy to dish the tea on anything that's happening, which I think, to a large degree, we're all grateful for, right?
Mhm.
We want to know what's going on where we're working, and you can't necessarily trust the company to be honest with you about even something as simple as what your job description is. What are you going to be doing? Um, so I would just say be cautious. Do not, bite the hook so hard. Um, there are still things that you'll need to learn as you navigate your way through. And I feel like I'm probably not alone in saying, as you hop from studio to studio, if that's what you end up doing, and that's what so many people in the industry do, you'll learn something new from everyone. And if you are able to protect yourself from burnout and abuse, um, you will find yourself with a good set of tools for managing yourself in a space.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, and I think this is something too that you're saying that is pretty consistent or common with any industry for that matter is you're gonna go through the process, get to know the lay of the land, so to speak, and it's with anything with life too. It's just a process of learning and understanding, but be mindful and all these other things and like you said, don't bite the hook. Just because this is like your dream job and everything, doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be taken advantage of. Especially if it's something you really want to do, and people are saying one thing, but then they're asking a lot more of you than originally promised. But hey, it happens all the time. But just be smart about those decisions. And I think you call out to a lot of great things that people should be aware of if they're really aspiring to work in the industry.
Yes.
So, with that said, and I know you mentioned a bunch of them earlier, but just to quickly summarize as we close here, could you just list like 3 suggestions or tips you'd recommend to indie devs, based on our discussion? And I know you shared a few just a moment ago, but any others you'd like to add to the mix?
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of indie devs, folks who are already making games or trying to make games, any in a studio or in a small team, I would just like to reiterate what we had talked about before, that being a boss, being a good manager is a separate skill from whatever it is that your technical expertise is in. And you need to train, or whoever you're going to have be the boss needs to train in people management. It's going to save your retention. It's going to keep you from having to deal with churn, and it's going to help your network. There are so many benefits to retention in the gaming industry, and you want to make sure that you are um, giving either yourself or your studio the best opportunity there. Secondly, whether you're working independently or you are employed with a studio, I would really really suggest to everyone to prioritize their own health over whatever product they are working on. Jobs come and go. once you're in the gaming industry, I don't think it's that difficult to stay in the gaming industry. And if a studio is asking you to sacrifice your whole life um, for a product, that's not okay. And acquiescing to that is going to result in burnout, which we've
Right.
seen, cause huge health issues for individuals and could end up taking years to heal from. So definitely prioritize yourself. There's no game in the world that's worth traumatizing yourself over like that. And finally, I kind of want to throw this one um, out to the hopefuls into gaming. Don't limit yourself to community manager, QA, or some really heavily forward facing role. Those aren't the only roles, and they're actually really hard. So if it's not something that you are passionate about, you're gonna find yourself in a spot where you're now open to uh, the malcontent of players potentially all across the world on a daily basis. Um, and so think about, what are you working in now? Do you enjoy working in that? If you want to get into gaming, but you don't want to do QA, you don't want to do community management, that is 100% okay. Games have a ton of jobs, and you can absolutely go in to the job that you actually want to have. We need administrators, producers, we have legal teams, we have HR, we have accountants, and analytic, everything. There are all of the typical positions that you would find in a company, and so many more. So don't tell yourself that all you can do to get into gaming is to become a contract QA. That is not the case. And we would really encourage you to find what you actually want to do instead of going into a position that you will immediately want to leave after day one.
Right. Because you're not doing yourself or anyone at that point any favors. Right.
Right.
Ex-
It's going to be hard for you. It's not going to be enjoyable, and the perception of the roles suffers when they're treated that way, rather than as valid career options. So I promise you, there are jobs in games that could probably use your skill set that you have right now. You just have to frame it right, or take those free online classes and get what you need to do the job that you actually want to do.
right. Yeah. Make your own opportunities and go for things that you enjoy doing.
Yes.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing those points. Really good ones. And you know what? I think a lot of those things aren't discussed enough out there because, I mean, we're always going to be making these types of mistakes, but the more we talk about it, the less likely they are going to happen. So, again, thank you so much with those tips. Now, but before we close here, really appreciate you being here with us and discussing this uh, information and providing this insight. Now, what are good ways that people can get in touch with you? What's your website so they can read all your game reviews and anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah. So if you want to check out my reviews, they are at www.indiehorde.com. And it's horde like dragon horde, not zombie horde. Those are two different hordes. And if you have a game that you are working on that you're interested in having people review, there is a contact form on the website. So please feel free to reach out. You can also find me on social media. I am chronically online, as it is my job to be on social media. So you can find me at Twitter. My handle is awesome Hylian, Hylian like Zelda, and it is Hylian, not Hillian. All of my UK friends, it is Hylian. It's canon. So you can find me there. And if you are a reader, like I am, obsessively, I have a book related TikTok. So you can find me on TikTok under Cassa's Bookshelf. And it's like my name, but instead of IE, it's an A.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And folks, if like Cassie said, if you want your game reviewed or whatever, check out our website and go submit your game, and maybe you should be able to consider and take the time to review it. But Cassie, thank you so much for being here. It was really a pleasure having you on the show today.
Yeah, this was great. I'm really happy that I was able to come on the show.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.